Okay, so I mean, I don't have anything prepared. I can just, but we've been doing this kind of session a few times at the Unconference, and it was always good sort of Q&A kind of thing. Let's see, off the top of my head, so a couple things to say. In ISO IC project.
Just kind of initial point of order. Could we have somebody please volunteer to take notes on this and update the wiki with those notes?
Well, I can take notes too, so that maybe someone else can also.
Okay, if you want to do that.
People have questions. Yeah. Okay.
I can take notes, but I may have to drop off towards the end of the meeting.
Okay. So an ISO project always has a time limit, and by project I mean whenever one standard is published. Then there's sort of a process by which you decide if you want to do the next version or if you just want to abandon it. And usually you go for the next one, and then that's a new project in a way. And there's a time limit, and the time limit is usually 48 months now. It used to be longer, but they've been pushing for sort of shorter. Actually, sort of the rumor has been going around. They're more looking for like 36 months, but most projects are 48 months. So if you count from 2016, you would recognize there should have been a new one already by now. But of course, because of, the clock doesn't literally start ticking when the previous one is published. So I don't know when the actual clock started ticking, but that's why you usually have this cadence of every 5 years or so there's a new one. So there's a new one coming soon, and obviously this whole COVID situation has also delayed that kind of work because just as it's affected everybody. So everything took a little longer. Extensions have been applied for, but from what I know now, and that's pretty solid, is there should be a new version next year in March or so. Because the time limit now is, I just looked it up, the time limit is in April of 2023. So the thing is basically, if you don't have it published by then, and this is already including all the extensions, right? So if you don't have it published by then, the whole project basically gets canceled and you have to start over from the start. So it's pretty safe to say that there will be something out at that point. So that will be SQL 2023 at that point. So we can maybe talk later, like what's in it and stuff, but some of the stuff that's, I already, some of my work that you might have seen is already kind of moving into that direction. Some of the stuff that's in Postgres 15 is already from that. And there's a few more things to come that I plan for Postgres 16. We can go into the details later. So that's the basic timeline of that. There is, so usually these ISO meetings are in-person meetings around the world, usually sort of 3 or 4 meetings a year. Again, because of COVID, all of that has been moved to Zoom meetings, just like this one, looks very similar. Which was good for me because I don't have the time and enthusiasm to travel to all these meetings, but I can go in a Zoom meeting once a month. So for me, that was actually kind of a, sort of a positive situation in that sense. And just as a lot of people have figured out remote work by now, ISO has also figured out remote and hybrid meetings. So I think there'll be more of that coming. I think what they're talking about now is sort of maybe one, in-person meeting and then followed by one remote meeting, sort of do a little bit more that way, but we'll see. So the first in-person meeting, sort of post-pandemic, so to speak, if it is post is the appropriate word, was in March. I didn't go to that one, but so they're moving back into that direction. The next one will be in Berlin in a month. I do plan to go to that one because it's convenient for me, and that's also in a way the last one. If you consider the timeline of, I said March 2023's publication, but this is sort of, if you want to think about it, last commit fest kind of mode, right? Because of the processing that has to be done. These things have to be like formatted and sent to Geneva for sign off, and then it has to be sent to all the national standards bodies for balloting, and this all takes a long time. And if there's any comments based on that, they have to be fixed. So in terms of feature development, so to speak, the meeting in June is the last one. And then shortly after that, it will be sent off through the motions. And at that point, it's basically done in terms of features. So yeah, so that's happening. So, next month, it'll be all wrapped up. And then by the time so Postgres 16 is out, we'll have a new version. Any questions so far? Everybody's on mute.
So I would like to know, let's say I want to contribute an SQL standard feature to Postgres that is currently not implemented, and I would like to know the best way to do it. My understanding is that I should open the documentation, the unsupported features page, and then somehow access the standard itself, which is behind the paywall, right? Or is it a better way to do it?
So you want to implement a feature in Postgres based on a standard, or you want to implement a feature in the standard?
I want to deliver a feature according to the standard.
Okay. Well, in that way, it's not too different from implementing a Postgres feature. You just make a proposal and explain why you want to do it. And whenever you make a proposal, you want to give some rationale, and the rationale could be any kind of the code is simpler, it makes it faster. People have been asking for it. It's in the standard is one of the possible rationale. Obviously, that's not usually just by itself, but it usually goes together with people have been asking for it.
I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to be putting words in someone's mouth, but one thing that might be what Alexander's trying to kind of get at here is, we want to make sure that we implement what the standard says when we are working towards implementing a standard feature. And to that point, it would be helpful to have some way of referring to the standard. Not everyone has or is able to get a copy of it. I don't know if that's
that's not a problem we can solve here today, right? It's
okay.
the whole standards process and open standards and all. I can tell you sort of everyone in the SQL standard working group is aware of the situation and is not happy with the situation, right? With that, they would all be happier working in some kind of open something, right? But this is sort of world politics you're up against in some way, right? And small steps are being taken, and I know other people in other subcommittees are kind of pushing around, and there's been something but open standards access, but that's high politics. I mean, that's not, we just have to deal with it. There's nothing we can do about that in a way, unless you want to, take up sort of a political cause in a way. Now, if you are a professional Postgres developer with an employer, I would argue, you can have your company buy it. If you are let's say you're a student enthusiast, I mean, there's probably ways we can help you, let's say, right? There's money available, there's ways to do that. I think if there's questions about that, you can maybe ask me directly, or there's funding available in the Postgres community for things if necessary.
Okay, thanks. And another question, does the community has a list of most wanted features from the standard, or we don't prioritize them? So my understanding is, for instance, that, I don't know, the support of Ada language is, or Cabal is probably not the top priority. So I wonder if there is a wiki page that says like we want this feature very much, and the rest are not a priority.
I'm not aware of that specifically. I think I think we should not necessarily approach it as we just need to, this is a giant checklist and we got to work through it eventually. There's certainly lots of obsolete, as you mentioned, sort of effectively obsolete things that we shouldn't worry about. And at this point, it's probably a lot of it. If you go to the unsupported features page, there's probably, I would say, just a good half of it is probably fully obsolete or not really relevant. I mean, some of the other ones are interesting, but how you prioritize your work is that's up to you in a way. I mean, there's certainly interesting things like, if somebody wants to look into row pattern matching, that's out there. I know some people are looking into that, but it's hard.
Yeah. So a couple of things.
I don't know if it's that useful, but but that's up to you, I think.
I would make two suggestions. One is Vic Fearing does a talk on he gave that at PGCon TE that I thought was a good talk, where he kind of goes over some of the things that at least he finds interesting in the standard versus what Postgres does, as well as areas where Postgres differs from the standard that maybe things that could be improved, or at least he views them as such. So at least that is one take on that question. So if you get an opportunity to see his talk somewhere, that might be helpful. The other one I would suggest is that, if there are things in the unsupported features list that we as a community or just can generally agree on that are things that are obsolete, I wonder if we could augment that list somehow and be like, we consider this to be an obsolete SQL feature that we don't intend to move forward with. So at least people are aware of what things are viewed as obsolete. And yeah, we can argue about that or whatever, but it would still be beneficial to at least get that kind of insight noted somewhere as a thought. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Peter, but it seems like
I think so. I think that would be helpful. I think you might get into some sort of a discussion that we sometimes have about what things should be considered, sort of deprecated and how deprecated things are, and then when people argue about what things are deprecated. And I mean, the funny thing is, the SQL working group is very much like this group, right? Or hackers. It's like people argue endlessly about what things should be deprecated and how deprecated things should be, and it's the same thing, right? There's things that are obviously deprecated, and then somebody proposes we should just write deprecated after that, or and then it's like, no, but people are still using it, and then you argue about what does deprecated mean. Does it mean we think it's not useful for new applications, or does it mean we'll remove it next release, and then things actually get deprecated, and then the next release somebody actually wants to remove it, and then somebody said, well, let's leave it deprecated for 3 more releases. It's the same thing. So
for
you have to kind of use your own judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say for things that at least have not yet been implemented in Postgres, and if nobody wants to argue against those being a deprecated thing, then we should maybe just mark them as deprecated. Like, let's make it very easy, right? Let's just go through that list of unsupported features and be like, these are the things that we think are not interesting, right? And then if anybody wants to argue against that, well, fine, we'll take that marker away, right? But at least that would still give us some idea of things that in general people don't feel it's worth arguing about anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that would be pretty easy if somebody wants to propose that. There's a really pretty easy way to add a comment to each feature and just say, uninteresting or obsolete or something like that. So, I mean, I have a list somewhere of like that's sort of similar to that, where I've basically gone through everything and said, like, I mean, this is not interesting. I don't understand this, and this is possibly an interesting feature, and this is just a technicality kind of thing. It's kind of usually one of those categories, but then there's a long tail of things you can't really decide what to do with. So that's why I never published that or anything, but I tried that. Yeah. So one thing I am I think there is sort of also a sense maybe for the next release to be a little bit more next release of SQL, which is then 27 or whatever, right, or something like that, to be a little bit more sort of aggressive and review like what we just talked about, like what's obsolete, what's deprecated, and then maybe remove some of those Ada, or I don't know, COBOL, or some of the maybe some of the parts that are not relevant anymore. So I think there's some interest in cleaning some of that up. So some of that could maybe come from upstream, so to speak, at some point. But we can make our own sort of commentary, of course. Okay. Any other questions? Well, let's see what else. Well, in terms of what's sort of new or what's coming, a lot of the work the working group. So the way the structure is, there's there's ISO at the top, ISO IEC actually at the top, Joint Technical Committee 1, and then SC32 is I think data management. So that's doesn't only include sort of databases specifically, but also includes sort of data formats, data exchange formats, and sort of metadata usage and stuff like that. So there's all this stuff going on there. And then WG3, you might have heard that term, working group 3, is database languages. So there's other database languages also in scope for that group. For the longest time, this has only been SQL, but as of a few years ago, work has started on a new graph database language, GQL, which will, I guess, probably also be published in the next 2 years or so. So a lot of work is going into that. And also a lot of work is going into the new part of SQL, which is called PGQ, which is property graph query, which I gave a talk about at PGCon probably last time we were in person. There's a recording of that. So a lot of the sort of let's say sort of creative work or new inventions in that group are all about graph databases now. So the actual sort of core, what is it called, foundation work is is not too much right now. It's sort of adding a few bits and pieces here and there, but it's nothing sort of super brand new in there. So I guess one thing that really is new is a JSON type. Right? If you recall, in 2016, there's JSON functions but no type, and that was also basically one of the sort of time constraints thing. Right, the clock was up. This is what we could finish, and we do the rest the next time. So that's basic sort of release management kind of thing. So that's in there now, and so I think there's already been. I think I saw at least one email about this, sort of some proposals of making the Postgres JSON types fit into that somehow better. So we'll see what comes out of that. I'm not involved with that, but so there's people looking into that. So I guess that's sort of the big new thing. And then there's some various sort of bits and pieces here and there. For example, the greatest and least functions have been added. There's LPAD and RPAD has been added. So this is already existing functionality. The thing that's in Postgres 15 that I worked on, the unique null treatment, is from there. And sort of things on that level, right? So there's no sort of huge new things that we need to catch up on, except the JSON work. I guess some of the stuff that's actually in Postgres 15, some of those functions are actually from the next version of SQL already. So maybe some of you have been wondering, couldn't find that anywhere, and the copy you have, that's where that's from. Yeah, so that's kind of where that is at. But in terms of what we could do, I think there's interest for the next version. But I think sort of streaming databases is still interesting. There's some people thinking about that. So that's maybe something that could come at some point as a sort of the next big feature. But the way this also works is that I guess there's also sort of an alpha beta release candidate kind of phase, and whenever you send that out, it's called a committee draft. You can get like a bunch of comments back of people just saying like, oh, here's a bug, or they can just say you should actually add this feature, right? And then you kind of work through that. And, it doesn't mean you have to do everything, but it's sort of a formal process of people could submit comments on your progress, and people submit all kinds of things. And there's also things like that we would recognize things like, well, why the select statement shouldn't require a from clause, right? Most systems support that. Why don't you support that kind of thing? Or also, all kinds of things that we would probably reject in terms of like, what about if the group by clause could refer to the select list? I'm not sure how you would do that without breaking compatibility, but those kind of practical things do come back as comments, and the working group is not necessarily opposed to that. You just kind of somehow has to figure out a way how to do it in a safe and compatible way. So everything's in play basically. If just somebody wants to do it, that's really also it works very much like open source, like Postgres. It's just people who do it in a sort of quasi-volunteer basis, right? I mean, some of them have it as their job, but it's kind of like you're on a sort of quasi-volunteer, and if you just do it, you do it. If nobody does anything, nobody does anything, right? And then it's just the same thing as before. So,
a quick question, if you don't mind me asking again.
yeah.
So I'm not aware of how transparent this standardization group works. So if I want to know what this group is up to and what it is working on, can I subscribe to some website or maybe mailing list to just be up to date?
If you want to participate in this, it's definitely possible. Unfortunately, it's not sort of possible in the way you subscribe as sort of in a lurking way. That's not possible because there are restrictions in terms of, well, the reason for all of this is sort of a paper trail of the intellectual property, right? You can't just come in as an anonymous person, submit some ideas, and then it's like a couple of years later, it's like, hey, I had a patent on that, So this is kind of why it's also, you've got to sign a bunch of papers. I mean, it's not interesting ultimately, but you do have to sign all those papers. And you can't just have sort of anonymous people show up, right? Maybe this is not that interesting for SQL, but you got to remember that, this is the same process that's used for sort of all kinds of things, right? Diameter of screws and performance of chainsaws and, so graphic standards, which are full of patents and stuff like that, right? So you got to follow certain processes. So that said, it's not that hard, but what you want to do is you find your national standards body in the country that's responsible for you. And that could be either, depending on sort of the local rules, this could be either where you live or where your employer is based. Both of those might work. And then you find, they usually have sort of a mirror group basically, or some contact person. You just say like, I want to participate in this working group. Then they'll tell you what to do. You have to sign up, pay some money, probably sign a bunch of papers, and then you're there. And then once you're there, it's like you subscribe to the hackers list, right? You initially probably encouraged to lurk and do some small things, and then if you want to do, you do big things. And sometimes people review your stuff and don't like it. Sometimes they don't review your stuff and it just gets committed. So if you're already, if you survived hackers, you can survive that. It's no problem at all. You just got to find the initial steps of bureaucracy to get in there. And well, then you obviously you kind of have to also show up and spend a little time.
Got it. Thanks. And Another thing I would like to know is you mentioned graph databases and streaming databases as subjects that are of interest to the group, and I wonder, to your knowledge, is there any interest to standardizing anything that has something to do with columnar backends, or maybe time series, or any other areas?
Well, the columnar stuff is a storage question, right? That's usually out of scope for SQL, right? Anything having to do with sort of storage layout and indexes and all that kind of stuff is sort of a level below the abstraction, so I mean, people are aware of it, right? And there's obviously columnar databases, analytics databases that have columnar storage that do implement SQL. So that is not really in scope. In terms of time series, it kind of, I guess it's not sort of one feature, right? Time series is more sort of a feature set of things. I think one thing that's also in progress right now, or has sort of started, is a separate standard that is basically sort of a function library. So instead of patching everything directly into the main standard, it's sort of a function library that's sort of specified separately that could then be implemented both in SQL and in GQL, maybe by someone else. So it's a little bit more of an abstract document, and that would potentially contain any number of sort of aggregate functions, statistics functions, that is interesting to analytics, maybe, or time series, maybe. But the other kind of things, I mean, looking at sort of the time series databases that are active in Postgres space, there's sort of interest in sort of materialization and continuous aggregation and that kind of stuff. That's kind of out of scope too, because those are sort of performance characteristics more, and not semantics, right?
What about the array stuff that was in the 2019 spec? That looked like something that Postgres could, in theory, since we've already got arrays and everything, could implement.
You mean the multi-dimensional arrays?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to do that, I mean, I don't really see that. I think that's sort of more of a specialized use case of huge arrays, right? I mean, obviously arrays exist and are fine in a way, but this is sort of for that's the way I understand it. That standard is for huge arrays that are sort of in, maybe, I don't know, maybe in sort of physics and astronomy applications.
Yeah,
where you
so like all the R
specialized
people,
access,
that would be a thing that R people would like, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know if anybody has implemented that yet, or what sort of because the
reference
sort of,
the reference implementation for that, the Rastaman, that actually uses Postgres as a backend. So he uses both Postgres and Oracle, I think, and but I'm not quite sure how he implements that.
I don't know really the details of that. That's kind of not my, that use case is not something I encounter. So I don't know what pain points that is really trying to address over sort of normal arrays, let's say. But yeah, if somebody knows more about that, I mean, it's out there. I suspect probably if you really want to address what I suspect to be those use cases, is you need to get sort of out of the 2 gigabyte toast limit, or because I don't think that's going to be sufficient. True. So maybe there's some work in that direction necessary first.
Because I mean, it's also an issue with Postgres raster, because raster is essentially a matrix. It's just huge matrices. So we run into that issue with the 2 gig limit and everything, which is kind of what makes Postgres raster not as useful as it could be because of those limits on the size.
So it sounds like there's more sort of some actually sort of lower level technical work necessary, and and obviously lifting that limit of lifting the it's not the toast limit, but I guess the datum length limit in a way. You could do that, somehow, but then you probably want sort of more efficient access to that too, right? It's just storing sort of 5 terabyte in there and then having no way to access it other than sort of exploding it all memory is not going to work. So there's probably a lot more work necessary there to do something
Because
useful.
it probably fit along the idea of Oleg's Toast, improving the Toast API so that you could cut into that.
Possibly, yeah.
Out of curiosity, for the raster stuff, are they typically written once, or are they like appended, or because like the current Toast approach is the biggest problem is not like making it useful for the bigger sizes. It's like that if you update the datums ever, like the amount of garbage that creates by like rewriting the entire datum every time is just tremendous. So that I'm asking.
Yeah, it's mostly just insert and then you don't touch it, because a lot of the raster sources, they come from satellite imagery and so forth. So you're not going to update again. You'll probably create a different data set if you were to do that.
Cool.
Okay, that's actually interesting. So you don't actually need partial updates. You just need, in that case. But actually the thing that was just alluded to is, this sort of something I'm sure a lot of people are aware of this sort of idea of what about if we have big JSON values, can we just do partial updates in some clever way? That's also on the ballot comment list at the moment, right? People say like, can we just have some syntax, some specification to update JSON values directly? Obviously that's just the abstract interface, right? The implementation you have to figure out, but that's something people think about and fairly good chance. Yeah.
The SQL interface be relevant there? Isn't that like a purely implementation thing of whether you can store somehow incremental changes on the bit data?
Well, you could imagine a syntax of saying something like update, field dot something equals new
like
value.
our subscripting, right? That would be
basically the subscripting or some kind of sub qualification on the sort of target site, and then if field is a JSON value, it would have to know something very specific about it. So I mean that's a possibility, I guess. I think that's the way people are thinking about it.
It still seems like it kind of is a separate thing, because you would still want to be able to append to an array or something, stuff like that, where you wouldn't have like a subfield accessor, and it should still end up as like a incremental write on the Toast or layer. So it kind of feels like treating the SQL subscripting access for like updating fields or something separate from like incrementally storing data.
Yeah, I guess not all cases may be covered by that, but if ultimately JSON is either arrays or objects. So if you have the ability to say field dot something bracket 5 dot something, then you can pinpoint some specific location in a JSON object and update that. I think that's kind of the kind of syntax I suspect some people would like from a user's perspective. So how we implement that's a whole open question, right? But that's not the concern of SQL specification. But I suspect, I think the Oracle people are all over that, I would guess. So it wouldn't surprise me if, Oracle, whatever, 28 or whatever they're up to now, I don't know, it would have something like that, and then it'll end up in the SQL working group. But there's nothing official about that. I'm just saying, I think that's pretty safe to say that some people are thinking in that direction. Okay. So I don't know while people are thinking of more questions, I took a couple of notes here, and this is the kind of questions that people have all the time. How do I participate? How do I request a feature? How do I get the standard? And I would probably have something about that in the wiki and the developer FAQ or something, but I might actually, with these notes, make a sort of top level wiki page, writing some of these things down. So that, can find out more about. In a way, I had a good lucky break in a way. I was actually at when was it? Must have been 2019 actually then, or was it 2020? I forgot. I don't know what time it is anymore. But I was at a different meeting, so a random little conference thingy here in Berlin also, and I met the working group convener there. Convener is sort of the German, I guess, right? And I just happened to meet him and just chatted with him, and like, so how does this work, and who do I have to ask about this, and what if I do this? Do I have to ask that person? And he just basically explained it to me, and after that it just was easy, right? It made sense. It's a bit hard if you don't know that, because you have no one to, there's no website, right? It's a little bit of a problem. There's no website to ask. I'm proposing to make that wiki page that website. Anyway.
I have a question, but I see Chris raising his hand. I'll let him go first.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Are you aware of any proposed changes to the SQL standard pertaining to full text search?
No, nothing about full text search.
Nobody's talking about it. That's just strictly a proprietary thing from database to database.
Right. I mean, there is sort of regular expression functionality, and everything beyond that is really almost it's kind of a storage and performance and indexing feature, right? Because if
well, it's syntax. I mean, it's find this blob of unstructured text within this set of fields. There's no standard way of saying that.
Right. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's about the one of the power of full text search is, I mean, one is the indexing, the other is sort of the stemming and the language awareness, and this is the best hit, and this is sort of the what is it called, the preferences, or in the results, and that's kind of hard to specify. I mean, of course you could specify it, right? But then you have to dive into like, what is a language and how do you define what language is. So I don't think that will show up. That's too difficult in a way, or it would cross too many boundaries, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I haven't heard anything about that.
So my question was, have you seen any activity involving allowing for default values in a cast statement? Like, if the cast fails, instead return this value.
Default value, if your cast fails, return this value. So if you cast some string to a number and it fails, you want to return like 0 or something?
Whatever was specified. Could be null,
Yeah, but
could be -1, whatever.
no, not at all.
Okay.
But I think that's the kind of thing you could definitely propose. I mean, I don't know if I haven't thought about the specific merits of this specific proposal, but that's the kind of thing you could definitely propose.
There's a few implementations out there, SQL Server and stuff have done their own things. I was thinking of emulating one of those.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I think that's something that could definitely, I mean, I don't know if it's necessary to standardize, but yeah, those are kind of things like, if a couple I mean, if obviously it comes from like a desire to actually use it, and then if a couple implementations do it, then I think it's definitely in scope. So maybe that's something to think about, but I haven't seen anything about it.
Thank you.
I mean, one thing I was thinking about, for example, there's a new feature in Postgres 15 relating to sort of, what is it? In foreign keys, you can specify in a delete cascade action, you can specify which columns. Oh no, in the set null, you can specify which columns you want to set to set null instead of all of them. So I've thought about maybe sending that in at some point. So that kind of stuff is possible. All right, let's see if I find anything else. Interesting.
Have there ever been discussions about standardizing more of the like administrative or like functions, like create index, create like also table, and so on?
Well, create index certainly not. Some of the so alter table stuff is definitely known about. One thing I actually did is I wrote a ballot comment to say, hey, we should standardize create or replace, which a lot of implementations actually also have, right? Obviously, Postgres copied it from somewhere, but it actually is surprisingly widespread. So, figured like, hey, and we have over the years, we have discovered lots of sort of open questions about how create or replace, or, the other ones too, if not exists, and all those like, what if you alter a table and a column and the table doesn't exist, but the column exists, or the column doesn't exist, but the table exists, and all these kind of things. So I figured, that would be worth looking at. And, people told me, yeah, people have tried that many times and it's super hard. So yeah, some of that stuff is known and desirable in some way, but it's apparently very difficult. Also, like, for example, renaming would be interesting, right? So it should be pretty straightforward, but there's actually sort of semantic differences there in terms of how. I just learned about that a couple of weeks ago. In Oracle, if you rename it an object that another object uses, that the other object breaks. So it doesn't track it by OIDs, it just breaks. There maybe implementations actually do it differently, so it might not be possible to do some of those things. But some of those things could be doable. So some sort of alter something DDL could be done in general.
Create table isn't specified either, right? So like it kind of feels odd to
Create
standardize.
table, yes.
I thought, or some of it is. I guess there was some of it standardized. Like, I think there was a lot of stuff in there that wasn't. Or something. It's been quite a while since I looked at the standards. So.
Like, I don't think they have create aggregate. That would be nice.
Yeah, that's actually something I was thinking about, because the well, this is now sort of around three corners, but as I mentioned, there's this other standard in discussion about specifying sort of a function library, right? So some of these are scalar functions, some of these are aggregate functions, and I was, and then the way this is, I mean, this is all in the early drafts right now, but the way it is sort of, it would specify sort of the functions in some sort of abstract way, in some mathematical notation perhaps, and then sort of in the appendix, it would say like, oh, here's the way you would map this to SQL. And then I would say like, oh, if this data type is actually that data type, this data type is that, and then you would create function, and this is how you would do it. And then we were talking about like, okay, well, what do you do for aggregates? It's like, well, there in Postgres, you can define aggregates in the user-defined way. We could do that here too. We could, somehow either describe it in this standard, or we can just put it all in SQL. There's also existing graph databases that have extensible aggregates. It's very similar. Okay, well, I guess maybe we can then wrap it up. I took some notes. I'll try to make a wiki page with some, in general, if anybody wants some more detail, sort of that is not appropriate to share, sort of, I guess we're streaming to the world here. If somebody has some detailed questions about what, who, when, where, always feel free to contact me directly. And as I mentioned, also, if anybody needs access to the standard and has no money, basically, then there's also ways to do that. We can figure that out, I think.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Peter, for everything. If you do end up creating a separate wiki page, please either let me know what the wiki page is, or link to it from the Unconference page. Or you can also just send me your notes and I can update the Unconference page. Either way is fine. However you want to do that.
Alexander, did you have a question? You had your virtual hand raised.
No, it was my virtual clapping to you as a speaker.
Okay. All right.
And
Okay.
then, yep, thanks a lot. I'll just let folks know that we're going to have a break here. So I guess for this particular stream, we'll have about a half-hour break. So you all can go jump on the other streams if you want for the last 15 minutes. And then we're going to start back up 14:30. So at the bottom of the hour. And this stream will be observability gaps that I believe Greg Smith was going to lead. So just as an FYI, but thank you very much, Peter, for leading the state of the SQL standard.
Okay.